Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so today, forget everything you thought you knew from like Sunday school flannel graphs. We are taking the gloves off and diving headfirst into the messy, brutal, often shocking source code of Western thought.
Yeah, we're talking about a collection of texts commonly known as the Bible. But the first thing to get straight is that it's not a book. Not really.
Right, it's more like a library, a chaotic one.
Exactly. A sprawling, ancient library crammed with wildly different stuff. We've got national myths, dense legal codes, some pretty steamy erotic poetry, flat-out political propaganda.
Yeah,
You name it.
right.
Written over, what, 1,000 years?
Yeah, it's a huge span, and it contradicts itself all over the place.
Constantly, which
Yeah.
is part of what makes it so fascinating and so, well, human. It doesn't try to hide the mess.
And that's our mission today, isn't it? To look at this stuff raw through the lens of history and maybe some psychological analysis. Pull back the curtain on the sex, the violence, the power plays,
Yeah.
the uncut version.
Precisely. Because underneath all that chaos, there's this surprisingly consistent, almost cyclical story trying to emerge.
What's the arc?
It starts with creation, naturally. But then, boom, rebellion. Then comes a covenant, like an attempt to fix things, set some rules,
It inevitably fails, right?
catastrophically,
Okay.
leading to punishment, exile,
Yeah.
total disaster. But then, somehow, woven through all the failure and bloodshed, there's this weirdly persistent, almost baffling hope for redemption that just refuses to die. It's quite something.
Okay, let's jump into that cycle. Where better to start than the beginning? Genesis chapters 1 to 11, the primordial stuff.
And right away, page 1, we hit a snag, a big one. People think there's one creation story.
But there isn't. There are two, right? Slapped together.
Yeah, fundamentally different accounts, side by side. It's the first clue that we're dealing with. An anthology, a collection, not a single author's smooth narrative.
So walk us through Genesis 1. What's that vibe?
Genesis 1 is majestic, cosmic, orderly. You've got this divine being, Elohim, who's kind of distant, powerful. He literally speaks the universe into existence over 6 days. Light, water, land, animals. It's restructured.
Like a divine architect.
Exactly. And humanity, significantly male and female, created together, is the grand finale on day 6. The pinnacle.
Okay, very grand, very clean. Then Genesis 2.
Totally different feel. It's
Yeah.
intimate, earthy, almost hands-on. The divine name changes to Yahweh Elohim, who feels much more personal, anthropomorphic.
He gets his hands dirty.
Literally. He doesn't just speak. He forms the man, Adam, from the dust, Adama, breathes life into him, plants a garden. And then the really weird part.
The rib.
Yeah, divine surgery. Puts the man to sleep, takes a rib, fashions the woman. It's dusty, visceral, almost primal compared to the cosmic poetry of chapter 1.
It's kind of amazing the editors just left them both there, isn't it? The contradiction is so obvious.
It really is. And it's a deliberate choice, I think. It tells you they were more interested in preserving these foundational traditions, even if they clashed, than in creating some kind of seamless, sanitized story. It says our origins are complex, maybe even paradoxical.
Okay, so these clashing beginnings set the stage. And Genesis 2 leads us into the fall.
Right. And again, we usually get the simplified, they disobeyed, ate an apple, bad humans version. But psychologically, it's way more profound. It's arguably the birth story of the human ego.
The ego. Explain that. What were they like before the fruit?
The text is specific, naked and unashamed. They exist in this state of, well, blissful ignorance, unconscious innocence. They don't judge themselves or each other. They're just part of the garden, like the animals.
Yeah.
No self-awareness, no duality.
A pre-egoic state. Like pure being.
Something like that. It's the mythological dream of unity before the split, before we started thinking me versus you, good versus bad.
But the fruit, the knowledge of good and evil, changes everything.
Instantly, it plunges them into duality. Suddenly, they see themselves as separate. They see their nakedness, and the first emotions they feel are shame they have to cover up and fear they hide from God.
Wow. So knowledge isn't just power, it's also shame and fear.
In this telling, yes, it's the tragic upgrade. They gain self-awareness, the ability to judge, to plan, to feel complex emotions. But they lose that innocent unity.
Right.
They become human in the way we understand it, complex, conflicted, self-conscious.
And isn't there that line where God says something like, now the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil?
Chilling, isn't it? It's
Right.
like, okay, you wanted the upgrade. You got it. Welcome to the club. But the price is anxiety, mortality, labor, pain, the whole messy human condition.
It's like the end of humanity's childhood. You gain knowledge, but lose innocence.
Beautifully put. And this newfound complexity, this self-awareness tainted by shame and fear, immediately spills over into the next generation with Cain and Abel, the first murder.
Yeah, Cain, talk about a primordial screw-up, and the setup is just fundamentally unfair, isn't it?
It feels that way, deliberately so, I think.
Yeah.
Abel the shepherd offers the best of his flock, the fat portions. Cain the farmer offers. Well, the text just says some of the fruits of the soil. It sounds less impressive, maybe.
And God accepts Abel's but rejects Cain's.
Well, the text never tells us. And that silence is deafening. Was Cain's offering subpar? Was his attitude wrong? Or was it just God's sovereign, inscrutable choice? We don't know.
Which sets up a crucial theme for the whole library, right? Divine favor doesn't always follow human logic or fairness.
Not at all. It often seems arbitrary, even cruel from our perspective. And that perceived injustice is what fuels Cain. His reaction isn't just simple jealousy.
What is it then?
It's deeper. It's that toxic, corrosive bitterness that comes when your sincere effort, your hard work, your sacrifice is rejected, deemed worthless by the ultimate authority. Imagine that feeling of cosmic insignificance, of being wronged.
His face falls, the text says.
Yeah, his whole countenance darkens. And God actually steps in, tries to counsel him. It's like the world's first therapy session almost.
What does God say?
It's fascinating. He acknowledges Cain's anger. Why is your face downcast? But then he puts the responsibility squarely on Cain. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it.
Wow. So the battle isn't external, it's internal. Master your resentment, your inner beast.
Exactly. The potential for evil lies within, crouching, waiting. And Cain, well, he fails the test miserably.
He lures Abel into the field.
And kill him. And it feels premeditated, cold. He's not just killing his brother. He's trying to destroy the evidence of God's favor, the thing that reminds him of his own rejection. He's lashing out against the judgment itself.
And his response when God asks where Abel is, am I my brother's keeper, just dripping with defiance and resentment.
It cements the archetype, doesn't it? Cain becomes the ultimate symbol of resentful victimhood that curdles into destructive violence. That bitterness, unmastered, leads to murder. And you see echoes of Cain throughout the rest of the story. It's a foundational human darkness.
Okay, so that's the messy start. Let's leap way forward now, past the patriarchs, past Egypt and the Exodus, into the period after they supposedly conquered the Promised Land. The Book of Judges.
Ah, Judges. If Joshua is the heroic, maybe slightly sanitized story of conquest and unity, Judges is the dark R-rated sequel where everything falls apart. It's grim.
What's the setup? Why does it all go wrong?
The text blames it on incomplete conquest. They didn't drive out all the Canaanites, so they start adopting their customs, their gods. Basically, they lose their way almost immediately after Joshua dies. And the book settles into this really bleak, repetitive cycle.
Describe that cycle. It sounds draining.
It is. Step 1, Israel does evil in the eyes of the Lord, usually meaning they worship idols like Baal and Asherah. Step 2, as punishment, God allows them to be oppressed by a neighboring enemy, Moabites, Philistines, whoever.
Okay.
Step 3, the people suffer, they cry out to God for help. Step 4, God raises up a judge. And let's be clear, these aren't courtroom judges.
No robes and gavels.
Definitely not. These are warlords, basically.
Yeah.
Charismatic, often deeply flawed, regional military leaders who rally some tribes and win a temporary victory. Step 5. There's peace, but only as long as the judge is alive.
And then?
The minute the judge dies, boom, back to step 1. And the text explicitly says they become even more corrupt each time. The downward spiral.
Wow. Relentless. And isn't there a line that sums it all up?
Yes, the haunting refrain that echoes through the book. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes.
Chilling. That's the thesis statement, isn't it? Anarchy rules.
Absolutely. The whole book feels engineered to make you feel disgusted and anxious. It paints a picture of what happens when there's no central authority, no shared morality, just chaos, tribalism, and escalating brutality. That feeling of hevel, of meaninglessness and vapor that Ecclesiastes talks about later, it's thick in Judges.
And the judges themselves, they're not exactly role models. More like an R-rated rogues gallery. Let's talk about Ehud, the left-handed assassin.
Oh, Ehud. Judges 3. It's so visceral, almost darkly comedic. He's a Benjamite, sent with tribute to the Moabite king, Eglon. And the text makes a point of saying Eglon was a very fat man.
Important detail.
Crucial detail. Ehud makes a short, double-edged dagger, hides it on his right thigh because he's left-handed, nobody would check there. He gets a private audience, claims he has a secret message from God.
And when the fat king stands up,
Ehud grabs the hidden dagger and plunges it deep into Eglon's belly. The description is, well, Graphic.
How graphic?
It says the fat closed back over the dagger handle so he couldn't even pull it out. And then it adds, and the dung came out. Or its contents spilled out, depending on the translation. It leaves nothing to the imagination.
My God. And then he just walks out.
Locks the doors from the inside, slips away.
Huh.
And the servants wait outside for ages because they think the king is relieving himself in his private chamber. The combination of brutal violence and toilet humor is unique. Shocking.
Definitely memorable. Okay, who's next in the gallery of horrors? Jail.
Jail. Judges 4 and 5. This one involves violating sacred hospitality codes. The defeated Canaanite general, Sisera, flees and seeks refuge in Jael's tent. In that culture, her tent should be the ultimate sanctuary.
She takes him in.
Oh, yeah. Gives him milk, which probably made him sleepy, covers him with a blanket, lulls him into a false sense of security.
And then?
Then she picks up a tent peg, a common household item, and a hammer. And while he's fast asleep, she drives that peg straight through his temple, pinning his head to the floor.
Jesus. And she's praised for this.
Wildly praised. The Song of Deborah in chapter 5 calls her most blessed of women. It shows the brutal us versus them reality of the time. An act of treacherous murder is celebrated as heroic patriotism. The ethical lines are completely blurred by the chaos.
Okay, the violence is ramping up. What about Jephthah and his vow?
Jephthah, Judges 11. This one is just tragic and horrifying. He's an outcast, a bandit leader, hired back by the elders to fight for them. In a moment of panic or foolish piety, he makes a rash vow to God. If you give me victory, I will sacrifice as a burnt offering whatever comes out of my house to greet me when I return.
Oh no, that sounds like a terrible idea.
It's disastrous, and explicitly against later laws condemning human sacrifice. He wins the battle, heads home, victorious.
And who comes out first?
His daughter, his only child, dancing with tambourines to celebrate his victory.
God, that's heartbreaking. Does he go through with it?
The text says he tears his robes in anguish, but feels bound by his vow. She asks for 2 months to go into the mountains with her friends and mourn the fact that she'll die a virgin, childless. He grants it, and then he browns it. And then he did to her as he had vowed.
They actually write that down. Human sacrifice.
Yes. It's presented matter-of-factly. It's shocking evidence of how far Israel had sunk, absorbing the horrific pagan practices of their neighbors. Absolute moral rock bottom.
It feels like it can't get worse. But Judges saves the worst for last, doesn't it? The Levite and his concubine.
Chapters 19 to 21. It's almost unreadable. It's designed to be utterly stomach-churning. A Levite traveling with his concubine stops in the Benjamite town of Gibeah. A mob surrounds the house demanding the Levite, presumably for homosexual rape, echoing Sodom.
But the host offers his own daughter and the concubine instead.
Yes, and the Levite himself ultimately shoves his concubine out the door to the mob to save his own skin.
Unbelievable cowardice and cruelty.
She's gang-raped all night. They find her collapsed on the doorstep in the morning, possibly dead, possibly dying. The Levite puts her on his donkey, takes her home, and then...
This is the infamous part.
He takes a knife, cuts her body into 12 pieces, and sends one piece to each of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Why? What is he doing?
It's a grotesque, horrific call to arms, a way to shock the tribes into action, to force them to confront the depravity that happened in Benjamin. It's political terror, basically.
And it works. It starts a war.
Oh, yeah. A brutal civil war. The other tribes unite and nearly wipe out the entire tribe of Benjamin. It's near genocidal.
But then they realize they've almost destroyed a tribe, and they need wives for the few remaining Benjamite men.
Right. Their solution is just as messed up. First, they slaughter the inhabitants of another town, Jabesh Gilead, for not joining the war, but spare 400 virgin girls to give to the Benjamites.
What?
And when that's not enough, they tell the remaining Benjamites to hide in the vineyards during a festival at Shiloh and literally kidnap dancing girls to be their wives. It's just layers upon layers of violence, atrocity, and moral collapse.
So what's the point of recording all this horror? What's the author's argument?
It's a brutal but effective political argument. Look at this chaos. Look at this depravity. Look at this endless cycle of violence when there's no central leadership. Don't you see? Don't you crave stability? Don't you desperately need a king to impose order and save us from ourselves? The entire book is a visceral argument for monarchy.
Okay, so the people eventually get their wish. They demand a king. First Saul, who's a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, tragic figure, paranoid, insecure.
And then comes David, the golden boy, the giant slayer, the musician king, the man after God's own heart. He's the answer, right?
He's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And his rise is incredible. Shepherd boy defeats Goliath with faith in a sling. Shows amazing restraint by refusing to kill Saul, his persecutor, multiple times, respecting the Lord's anointed. Unites the tribes, establishes Jerusalem. It's the peak.
There's always a but in this library, isn't there? The narrative doesn't shy away from his dark side.
Not at all. In fact, David's story becomes maybe the most powerful cautionary tale in the whole collection about the corrupting influence of absolute power. Right at the height of his success and authority, he screws up spectacularly.
We're talking Bathsheba, 2 Samuel 11.
Yep. The setup itself speaks volumes. The king is lounging on his palace roof while his army, including Bathsheba's husband Uriah, is off fighting his battles. He sees a beautiful woman bathing.
Bathsheba?
He asks who she is, finds out she's married to one of his elite soldiers. And what does he do? David sent messengers and took her.
Took her. That phrasing feels significant.
It's huge. There's no ambiguity about consent here. He's the absolute monarch. She's the wife of a subject. When the king summons you, you don't refuse. This isn't seduction. It's an abuse of power, a sexual assault enabled by his position. He sleeps with her.
And then she sends word, I am pregnant.
Panic mode. The cover-up begins, and it's just chillingly calculated. Shows how power can completely erode morality.
What's his first move?
Bring Uriah back from the front lines. The plan is simple. Get Uriah to go home, sleep with his wife, and then everyone will assume the baby is his. Plausible deniability.
But Uriah messes up the plan.
Ironically, through his own profound integrity, Uriah refuses to go home. He tells David, basically, how can I enjoy the comforts of home, my wife, food, when the Ark of the Covenant and my comrades are sleeping rough in tents at the battlefront? He sleeps outside the palace gate with the king's servants.
Wow. Uriah's loyalty actually exposes the king's treachery.
Completely. So David gets him drunk the next night, trying again.
Yeah.
Still, Uriah refuses to go home. His honor is absolute.
So David's plan B fails. What's plan C?
This is where it gets truly dark, utterly ruthless. David writes a letter to his general Joab, and he gives the letter to Uriah to deliver.
Uriah carries his own death sentence.
Yes. The letter commands Joab to put Uriah in the fiercest part of the battle, right up front, and then pull the other troops back, leaving him exposed to be killed by the enemy. Murder by proxy.
Just cold. Calculated murder of a loyal soldier to cover up adultery committed through abuse of power.
It's about as low as you can get. And Joab does it. Uriah dies. David marries Bathsheba. He thinks he's gotten away with it. Case closed.
But the prophet Nathan shows up.
Enter Nathan. 10 Samuel 12. This is one of the most courageous, brilliant, prophetic confrontations ever recorded. He doesn't storm in yelling accusations.
He uses a story, right? A parable?
Masterfully. He tells David about 2 men in a city, one rich with huge flocks, one poor with only a single little ewe lamb that he loved like a daughter. A traveler comes to the rich man, but instead of taking one of his own sheep, the rich man steals the poor man's beloved lamb and cooks it for his guest.
And David.
David explodes in rage, completely misses the point. He declares, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity. Self-righteous fury.
Setting himself up perfectly.
For Nathan's knockout punch. Nathan just looks at him and says, you are the man.
Boom. Devastator.
The reversal is total. David is caught. And to his credit, he immediately confesses, I have sinned against the Lord. No excuses.
So God forgives him.
Yes. Nathan tells him the Lord has taken away his sin. He won't die for the adultery and murder which the law demanded. There's grace, forgiveness, but, and this is crucial, forgiveness does not mean no consequences.
Ah, the other shoe drops.
Big time.
Nope.
Nathan delivers the prophecy. Because you've done this, the sword shall never depart from your house, and the consequences are immediate and brutal. The child conceived with Bathsheba gets sick and dies, despite David's fasting and praying. Then his own family implodes. His son Amnon rapes his half-sister Tamar. Tamar's brother Absalom murders Amnon in revenge. Then Absalom leads a full-blown rebellion against David, driving him out of Jerusalem. It's chaos, violence, betrayal, incest, all stemming from David's initial abuse of power.
So the story of the ideal king becomes a warning.
A massive warning. If even David, the chosen one, the man after God's own heart, can fall this far, become this corrupt when given absolute power, then the entire system of human monarchy is inherently dangerous. It's a profound political critique embedded right in the heart of the royal narrative. No human ruler can be fully trusted.
Wow. Okay, so the kingdom eventually divides after David's son Solomon. Things go downhill, prophecies of doom, leading inevitably to the next great catastrophe, exile.
Right. The northern kingdom, Israel, is wiped out by Assyria. Then in 587 to BCE, the Babylonians conquer the southern kingdom, Judah. They destroy Jerusalem, level Solomon's temple, the very house of God, and deport the elite, the priests, the artisans, to Babylon.
This must have been shattering, not just militarily, but theologically.
An existential crisis doesn't even cover it.
Yeah.
The temple gone, the Davidic monarchy gone, the promised land gone. It fundamentally challenged their entire worldview.
Mm.
Had their God been defeated? Was he weaker than the Babylonian gods?
Yeah.
Or had he abandoned them?
How did they even process that? How did Judaism survive?
Through an incredible act of theological and cultural reinvention, largely driven by the scribes and priests in exile. They couldn't rely on place,
Yeah.
the temple, or political structure of the monarchy anymore.
So they had to make their faith portable.
Exactly. The focus shifted massively towards the text gathering, editing, canonizing the scrolls that would become the Hebrew Bible, the Torah. Prayer and synagogue gatherings replaced animal sacrifice as the primary modes of worship, and crucially, they reframed the disaster. They interpreted the exile not as God's defeat, but as God's judgment, as divine punishment for their centuries of covenant unfaithfulness, their idolatry, their injustice, just as the prophets had warned. This was genius, in a way. It preserved God's sovereignty. He was still in control, even in disaster, and put the responsibility back on the people. It allowed them to maintain their identity and their relationship with God, even in a foreign land.
And this period of trauma and reinvention produces some fascinating literature about how to live as a faithful minority under a powerful, often hostile, pagan empire. We get different models for survival.
Two key examples, often contrasted, are Daniel and Esther. They offer radically different strategies.
Let's start with Daniel. What's his approach?
Daniel represents the spectacular faithfulness model. He and his friends Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego are Jewish exiles rising through the ranks of the Babylonian and Persian courts, but they maintain absolute fidelity to Jewish law, often publicly defying pagan decrees.
Like the famous fiery furnace story.
Right. The three friends refuse to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's giant golden statue. They know the penalty is death by fire. Their statement of faith is incredible. They say, essentially, our God is able to save us from the furnace.
But even if he doesn't?
But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Their obedience isn't conditional on rescue.
That's powerful. And of course, in the story, they are rescued.
Miraculously, they walk out unharmed, not even smelling of smoke. The pagan king is forced to acknowledge the power of their God. Same with Daniel in the lion's den. He keeps praying openly towards Jerusalem. Despite a decree forbidding it, gets thrown to the lions, and God shuts their mouths.
So the Daniel model is be uncompromisingly faithful, even if it means public defiance and risking death, and trust God for spectacular supernatural deliverance?
Pretty much. It emphasizes divine intervention, miracles, God visibly protecting his faithful servants against impossible odds.
Okay. Now contrast that with Esther. Very different vibe.
Totally different. Esther presents the subtle maneuvering model. The most striking and controversial thing about the book of Esther is that the name of God is never mentioned. Not once.
Seriously, in a book of the Bible, no God.
No explicit mention. No miracles, no prophecies, no angels, no divine voice. The entire story unfolds on the level of human politics, court intrigue, hidden identities, courage, and really clever strategy.
So what's the story?
Esther is a Jewish orphan in Persia who, through a series of unlikely events, becomes queen. She has to hide her Jewish identity. Meanwhile, the king's evil vizier, Haman, plots a genocide against all the Jews in the empire.
And Esther has to stop him.
Yes, urged on by her cousin Mordecai. But it's incredibly risky. To approach the king unsummoned could mean death. Esther fasts, prepares, and then takes her life in her hands, famously saying, "If I perish, I perish."
Does she perform miracles? Does God intervene directly?
Not visibly. Instead, Esther uses her position, her intelligence, and her courage. She hosts banquets, subtly manipulates the king and Haman, exposes Haman's plot at just the right moment. It's all human action, timing, and political savvy.
And it works.
Spectacularly. Haman is exposed, the king is furious, and Haman ends up being hanged on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. The Jews are given permission to defend themselves, and the day of destruction becomes a day of victory.
So if God isn't mentioned, where is he in the story?
That's the literary genius of it. Commentators talk about hidden providence. God seems absent, but the narrative suggests his hand is guiding events through a series of coincidences. The king having insomnia and reading the court records just when Mordecai's past good deed needs remembering, Haman arriving at the wrong moment, Esther finding favor. God works through human actions, courage, and political realities, rather than overtly against them like in Daniel.
So two survival strategies from the exile, Daniel's overt miraculous faithfulness and Esther's covert politically savvy courage.
Exactly. Both are validated as ways for God's people to navigate life as a vulnerable minority in a potentially hostile world. Sometimes you need public defiance, sometimes you need subtle wisdom.
Okay, fast forward again. The Jews return from exile, rebuild a smaller temple, but they're still under foreign rule, Persians, Greeks, then Romans. The glory days aren't really back. And into this simmering pot of Roman occupation and Jewish expectation steps Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah, and his message wasn't just be nice, it was radical, disruptive. His central theme was the kingdom of God.
Which wasn't a place, right? More like God's rule breaking into the world.
Exactly. A new reality, a new way of being, where God's justice, mercy, and power were becoming actively present. And his primary tools for explaining this were parables.
We tend to think of parables as simple stories with a moral, like Aesop's fables.
But they weren't like that at all, really. They were often deliberately enigmatic, confusing, designed to mess with your assumptions. They were like little intellectual hand grenades lobbed into the crowd.
How so? Give an example.
Think about the parable of the workers in the vineyard. Guys hired early in the morning, work all day in the heat. Other guys get hired literally an hour before quitting time. And the landowner pays them all the exact same wage.
Which seems incredibly unfair.
Totally unfair by human standards. The guys who worked all day grumble, obviously. But the landowner says, "Didn't you agree to the wage? Am I not allowed to do what I want with my own money? Are you envious because I am generous?" That parable isn't about fair wages. It's designed to shatter our deeply ingrained human ideas about earning God's favor through merit and replace it with the scandalous concept of God's completely unearned, extravagant grace. It forces you to rethink everything.
So his teachings were intentionally provocative, and they got him into trouble with the religious authorities, the Pharisees, and others.
Big trouble. The clashes were frequent and intense, often revolving around the core markers of Jewish identity at the time.
Like the Sabbath.
Huge flashpoint. Jesus consistently healed people on the Sabbath, deliberately challenging the strict interpretations of Sabbath law. He argued that mercy and human need trump ritual observance, famously saying the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
And purity laws. Who you could eat with.
Another major battleground. He deliberately associated with people considered unclean or sinners, tax collectors, prostitutes, lepers, Samaritans. He argued that true defilement wasn't about external contact or food, but about what comes from inside a person. Evil thoughts, murder, adultery, theft. He redefined purity from ritual to internal morality.
But the biggest conflict seems to have been over his own authority.
Absolutely. He didn't just interpret the law of Moses, he seemed to claim authority over it. He'd say things like, "You have heard that it was said by Moses, but I say to you." That's an astounding claim. And even more controversially, he claimed the authority to forgive sins, something only God was supposed to be able to do. That was seen as outright blasphemy by many leaders.
This escalating conflict leads directly to his arrest and trials.
Yes. The gospel accounts detail a rushed, likely illegal night trial before the Jewish council, the Sanhedrin, struggling to find consistent testimony against him. But ultimately, they can't execute him themselves under Roman law.
So they have to take him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate.
Right. And they cleverly shift the charge. Before the Jewish council, it was primarily blasphemy. Before Pilate, they accuse him of political sedition, claiming to be king of the Jews, a rival to Caesar. That's a charge Pilate has to take seriously.
Pilate seems conflicted in the accounts, doesn't he? But ultimately caves.
Yeah, the Gospels portray him as seeing through the leader's jealousy, maybe finding Jesus more eccentric than dangerous. But Pilate was known historically as a ruthless governor. His primary concern was keeping order and avoiding a riot, especially during Passover. The political pressure from the crowd and the chief priests forces his hand. He famously washes his hands, symbolically absolving himself, but then hands Jesus over to be crucified. A purely political decision.
And crucifixion. We sanitize it now with cold crosses, but it was horrific. Pure Roman state terror.
Unimaginably horrific. It wasn't just about killing someone. It was about maximum public humiliation and excruciating prolonged agony as a deterrent. It was reserved for slaves, rebels, the lowest of the low.
What did it actually involve physically?
It usually started with a brutal scourging. The flogging with a whip called a flagrum, leather thongs, embedded with bone or metal, designed to shred flesh, expose muscle, sometimes even hit organs. Massive blood loss and shock before even reaching the cross.
And then the nailing.
Typically nails to the wrists, between the radius and ulna, which would often sever the median nerve, causing blinding pain, and through the feet, then hoisted up.
And the actual cause of death wasn't the nailing itself?
Usually not directly. It was slow asphyxiation. The weight of the body hanging by the arms makes it incredibly difficult to exhale. To get a breath, the victim had to push up with their nailed feet, scraping their already shredded back against the rough wood of the cross. An agonizing cycle of fighting for air until exhaustion, shock, dehydration, or heart failure finally killed them, sometimes hours, sometimes days. It was torture designed to break a person completely, publicly.
A truly ghastly end, yet the story doesn't end there. That's the whole point, isn't it? The central claim.
The absolute pivot point, the non-negotiable core of early Christian belief. The empty tomb and the resurrection appearances.
And the claim wasn't just that his spirit lived on or that people had visions.
No, the accounts, especially Paul's very early letters, insist on a bodily resurrection. Different, transformed, able to appear and disappear, but physical enough to eat, to be touched. Paul lists witnesses Peter, the apostles, James, Jesus' own skeptical brother who became a leader after the resurrection, and then more than 500 brothers and sisters at the same time. He even includes himself, the persecutor turned apostle.
And Paul basically stakes everything on this, doesn't he?
He makes the absolute foundation. He writes flat out, if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. And later, if only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are of all people most to be pitied. For Paul, if the resurrection didn't happen physically, historically, then the whole thing is a tragic delusion.
So the resurrection is presented as the ultimate game changer, the divine answer to the cycle of sin, failure, exile, and death that dominates so much of the library we've been exploring.
That's the audacious claim, that in this one event, God broke the cycle, defeated death itself, and launched the new creation, the kingdom he'd been proclaiming. It's what transforms a dead rabbi into the center of a global movement.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, from the contradictory creation stories and the birth of the ego, through the absolute anarchy and horror of the judges, the corrupting nature of power in David's story, the trauma at exile and the different ways to survive it, right up to the brutal execution and the staggering claim of resurrection.
It's quite a journey. And what strikes me, looking back across this vast, chaotic library, is its relentless honesty. It doesn't sugarcoat human failure, political manipulation, or religious hypocrisy.
Yeah.
It puts it all out there.
Yeah, the enduring power isn't in neat answers, is it? It's in that raw portrayal of the human struggle, the psychological depth.
I think so.
Yeah.
And the really central theme, the thread that somehow holds it all together despite the chaos, is this idea of resilience. Not necessarily human resilience, though there's courage, but the resilience of the promise, the covenant idea.
How so?
The promise of God's presence, his blessing, his eventual redemption. It somehow survives despite the people involved. The patriarchs lie and cheat, the judges are thugs, the kings abuse power, the people constantly rebel, yet the narrative insists God remains faithful to the promise. It survives in spite of its human bearers, not because of them.
So God's faithfulness overrides human failure.
That seems to be the core theological argument running through the whole messy collection. And if you take that seriously, alongside the parts we discussed, God's seemingly arbitrary fator, like with Cain and Abel, or the vineyard workers, the deep unfairness and violence baked into the world of judges, the concept of hevel, meaninglessness.
It raises some pretty big questions about where we find meaning, doesn't it? If the world depicted here is so often chaotic, unjust, and God's actions don't fit neat human logic.
Exactly. What does this library actually teach us about navigating our own chaotic world? If divine wisdom operates outside our systems of fairness and merit, if the story is full of human depravity and incomprehensible divine choices, where do you anchor yourself?
Maybe the final takeaway, the ultimate act of faith suggested by this raw, uncut material, isn't about finding simple answers or a predictable God.
Perhaps it's about learning to trust something deeper, that stubborn, resilient hope that persists even when the text itself and the world around us feels violent, messy, and profoundly unfair. Maybe it's about trusting an incomprehensible wisdom in the face of chaos.
Definitely something to wrestle with, a lot to think about there.